as soon as that recording goes.
Shirley, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. Of course, I start on mute. Good morning, and thank you all for joining us for this webinar, The Roadmap to Funding, presented by the Division of Housing's Office of Housing Finance and Sustainability. This presentation covers the application process assigned to housing development specialists. Other Office of Housing Finance and Sustainability programs are not discussed in detail, but brief information will be offered and context will be provided at the end of the slideshow. I'm Shirley Diaz, and I'm the Housing Development Specialist located in and serving Southwest Colorado. I've been with the Division of Housing and the Office of Housing Finance and Sustainability for almost 3 years and working on housing in the region for 19. Pam?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Pam Gibson. I'm a housing development specialist and the training lead for the Division of Housing. As a development specialist, I cover the north central region of the state. I started at DOH 4 years ago and have 25 years of experience in affordable housing development and policy.
Can we have the next slide, Malia? So there is a disclaimer because Pam and I are not attorneys. And so we want to make sure that people are aware that all of the information and materials today are for educational purposes only. Next slide, Malia. Pam?
Okay. Today, Shirley and I are going to walk through the application process. We'll start by introducing staff roles, and then we'll describe funding sources for both housing development and housing programs. Next, we'll talk through the steps of the pre-application process and the formal application process, including the nuts and bolts of the Neighborly application software and the budget spreadsheet. We'll move on to the application checklist that describes the required supporting documentation. Wrapping up, we'll take a look at the scoring process and the application timeline, leaving room for questions and comments throughout the session. Now I'll turn it over to Shirley for an introduction to staff roles.
So our Division of Housing and Office of Housing Finance and Sustainability, in order for me to not have to say that repeatedly, I'm going to use the acronym OHFS that we use, OHFS. And this is we're comprised of 3 teams: the housing development specialists, the underwriters, and the asset managers. The housing development specialists are assigned regions and work with applicants from project concept to application submission and into the receipt of funding. The applicants and the developers can represent nonprofits, local governments, housing authorities, for-profits, resident-owned community cooperatives, or other assigned buyers for a mobile home park. The housing development specialist is here to facilitate the submission of an application and may work with a potential applicant for a year or more, or just a few months. The development specialist also provides resource information related to the application and other related housing questions. A primary goal is to review all documents in advance to assure a complete application is submitted. Next slide, please. So the color-coded map aligns with the development specialist on the right, and you can see who represents your region. The QR code can be scanned and will take you directly to the web page. And we've put the link in the chat to our web page as well. The next team that is involved in our process are the underwriters, and they provide an initial and then thorough threshold review to confirm an application is accurate and complete. They notify applicants if items are missing 10 days after application submission. Completed applications then go into full review. The underwriters begin assessing documents and the application for accuracy. They also deliver a spreadsheet analysis, and they create a document for review while completing the application assessment. The underwriters also prepare documents for pre-contracting handoffs. And their primary goal is to evaluate the feasibility and probable success of a project. Our third team is our asset management team, and the asset managers assist the development and underwriting teams by reviewing the applicant history during threshold review and sharing any complications. They assess covenants and deed restrictions that are provided in advance. Asset managers also provide technical support to applicants, and they assure compliance throughout an active agreement all the way through to closeout. So we're going to take questions in the chat if you have any. So if you want more information about our three teams or have a question at this point, please put that in the chat.
Okay, next slide, please.
Thank you, Pam.
I'm going to talk about funding for development projects. DOH has two major pots of funding, federal funds and state funds. Both support housing development activities and housing programs. As overview, DOH funds serve as gap fillers to bridge the difference between the cost of the project and the primary funding sources, which could include a bank loan, low-income housing credits or LIHTC, community grants and loans, and owner equity. We serve the entire state, and therefore each funding round is competitive. It's not uncommon for DOH to receive 3 times the amount of requests for the amount of funding available in any given round. So we want to help you make your application as strong as possible. There are fluctuations in the amount of funding available in each round. Some funding sources are only available to specific applicants and project types, such as governmental agencies, nonprofits, LIHTC projects, and homeownership. LIHTC project, we'll work with you to identify the best fit for your specific project. And finally, we'll receive your application toward the end of your project planning. This is when most sources of other funding in your capital stack are confirmed, which will highlight the gap that you are requesting DOH to fill. Federal funds come from HUD for 3 longstanding programs. There's the Home Investment Partnership Program, which is referred to as HOME, the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, and the National Housing Trust Fund. It's important to note that federal funding can prompt compliance requirements that add cost to your project. So these might include Davis-Bacon wages, an environmental assessment, and BABA, which is the Build America, Buy America Act. It's a newer federal policy that mandates that developers use materials produced in the United States. Our asset team and environmental compliance officers can help navigate these requirements. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. The division also provides state funds for housing projects. These come through 2 primary sources, the Housing Development Grant, or HDG, and Proposition 123. DOH manages Proposition 123 funding for homeownership, scattered site homeownership projects across the state, mobile home parks, and supportive housing for people experiencing homelessness. Subsidies for each of the programs listed on this slide, that's $50,000 to $55,000 per unit for HDG and $70,000 per unit for Prop 123, are shown as maximum awards. The final per unit award amount will depend on project characteristics and the availability of funds. For development, DOH funds can support projects that directly increase the supply and quality of affordable housing. Activities include the new construction of rental and ownership homes, acquisition of land and buildings, and property rehab and infrastructure. HDG primarily serves new construction, acquisition, and rehab of rental units. This source is suitable for most projects. Almost any applicant and project type can apply for these funds, including nonprofits, government agencies, housing authorities, tribal governments, and for-profit developers. DOH's Prop 123 program funds new construction and acquisition of homeownership units, including mobile home parks and scattered site homeownership models. Funds can go toward rehab activities and for mobile home parks specifically, administrative support. Permanent Supportive Housing, PSH, supports rental units through the persons experiencing homelessness, or the PEH portion of the grant. I realize this is a lot of information, so you won't need to decide what type of funding you want to request for your project. Rather, your development specialist will let you know which funds line up best with your project characteristics. We also now have pre-development funding to help cover professional fees and soft costs. You can use the QR code to access information about which entities can apply and what funds can be used for. Now we'll switch our focus to housing programs. Programs that you'll hear about now are managed by the asset management team. DOH funds government and nonprofit programs that benefit their communities' low and moderate income households. One program provides down payment assistance to help first-time home buyers with the purchase of their home. Another program offered is the Single Family Owner Occupied Rehab Program, also known as SFOO, which supports homeowner repairs and improvements. This funding extends to mobile homes and the construction or rehab of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. And Malia is going to drop this link into the chat. It looks like she already has. Thank you, Malia. And federal home funds go toward community development housing organizations called CHODOs that have the staff capacity to develop an identified housing project in their community. Funds can be used to cover pre-development costs, strengthen staff expertise, and contribute to the administrative and operating activities that increase the stock of affordable housing. We will drop a link in the chat to the Home Final Rule Policy Memo that covers recent changes to home regulations for those of you who are interested in this program. If you'd like to apply for these funds, you can submit a letter of intent by August 15th, which is right around the corner on Friday. Brad Wood manages the program, and his contact information can be found on one of the final slides in this presentation. Are there any questions about anything we've covered so far? Okay, now Shirley will delve into the application process.
So we're going to go from pre-application all the way through concept. From concept, I'm sorry, all the way to providing a full application. After learning all of the different funding sources, which is a lot of information, you'll be able to go back and reference these slides, work with your housing development specialist in your region, and then also the information is found on our Division of Housing application webpage, which that link is also being placed in the chat. So the first step in this process is to reach out and work with a housing development specialist. They'll listen to the project's concept, or if you're further along, the details, and they'll start talking with you about our gap funding sources, depending on the type of project that you have in mind. They'll also work with you on our timeline for applying and which cycle might be the best one for you to come into. And then they'll also review the list of required documents for pre-application and full application. So this will occur over several different conversations, and it can be over many months, or it can be over a short time, you know, as much as a few weeks. So they will also give you the application instructions and links to documents discussed, and typically additional funding sources that you can explore. Read over everything after you meet with your housing development specialist, and then reach out with, you know, with additional questions. So since applications and LOIs for our next round is technically August 15th for our October 1st round, I'm showing you our next dates. So we have a letter of intent to apply and documents due on October 31st for the November 13th low-income housing tax credit first 9% round in 2026. Then there is a December 15th LOI and documents due date with a full application due on February 2nd of 2026. And this is for either rental or home ownership with federal funding, or Prop 123 home ownership funds for home ownership projects. Our second step is going to be for the pre-application process, working with your housing development specialist. And you're going to hear me say that title a lot. You'll be saying it with me shortly. Once you both have determined that you're eligible and ready to move forward with the pre-application process, you'll work to make sure that you meet our pre-application deadline and prepare the 3 items to be submitted. So these items are a letter of intent to apply, and there's a template on the application webpage that was already provided. A spreadsheet, and you're going to download the spreadsheet template that applies to your project and then open it up in Excel. It does not work properly within Chrome or any other browser, so you have to open it in Excel. And then finally, the required neighborly sections A through H with all of the items filled in. So this is our online application program, and you'll learn more about it. No documents are required to be uploaded in Neighborly in this pre-application process timeline, even though it will say documents required. Document uploads are required for the full application process only. So your pre-application discussions are going to include sources that fit the project, state or federal. And then we do actually make full funding, you know, recommendations and decisions internally, just so you know, but they will, your housing development specialist will talk with you about what does work, what's most appropriate for your project. The requested amount, Pam also introduced some of our limits, depending on funding sources. And that you'll be going into more detail with your housing development specialist. And then other funding sources to pursue. So we'll often provide grants or other lending information links after a meeting for you to be able to explore on your own. And then we'll discuss the income levels that the project will serve, and based on the funding source and the need that has been shown in your area. A fair housing discussion will include brief questions regarding if any special populations are going to be targeted, how you will meet accessibility requirements, and if your tenant selection plan is following fair housing laws. We'll ask about what resource information you might need so you're not violating any fair housing laws. Then we'll let you know that our funding is paid on a reimbursement basis and that we withhold 5% until closeout. This is the only exception for this is acquisition only projects like a mobile home park. And then federal funding brings with it discussions which were introduced with Pam around Build America, Buy America, or BABA, and other requirements that come with federal funding. If project-based vouchers are part of a permanent supportive housing project, cross-cutting requirements will be discussed relating to federal requirements. However, at the moment, there are no project-based vouchers available. Your housing development specialist will be able to update you when there is a change in availability. Then local contributions, loans, and lien positions are all part of the funding stack that needs to be discussed and put into your spreadsheet during this letter of intent period. You want all sources in this pre-application spreadsheet because you need at least 75% of the project costs covered and confirmed in order to continue to move forward to full application. Our DOH funding would be considered a pending source and therefore would not be part of the 75% confirmed sources. So the road to submitting a pre-application involves discussions and meetings to help you as an applicant provide a complete application 45 days later. Are there any questions now?
Shirley, we did get a question in the chat a few slides back, but it was just asking if you have to have a project in process to qualify. I wasn't sure if you can answer that.
Yes, I mean, our pre-application and application process does require that there is a project in mind. Again, acquisition and new construction can be part of that. So you don't have to have site control for this pre-application and application process.
Right, it looks like Brenda Lee has a question.
Okay, I'm going to try to repeat what I think I heard on the process. So an LOI, and I'm talking in particular about the schedule you put up for the 9% round. Did I hear correctly that we need to have an application in, but not the supporting documents at the February 2nd round? That also includes commitment for 75% of the funding, because it sounds backward to me. Like, well, we won't have tax credits committed, obviously, unless we are awarded tax credits. So it seems like we can't meet both things. We can't have a 75% commitment and apply for tax credits and not know that we have them. So help me understand that.
Yes, so that round that you're talking about specifically is a little bit different round because we are doing a pre-application process. So you will still work with a housing development specialist in your region, but it is different than our standard rounds. So great question. And do you know who your housing development specialist is in your region?
I do, it's Pam.
Okay, so Pam will work with you on the particulars of actually getting everything done for that round.
Okay, we'll be talking, Pam.
Okay.
Any other questions?
There were a couple more in the chat.
Yeah, it looks like we had a question about who to reach out to for opportunities that would fit their projects. I believe that would be their housing development specialist. So I'm not quite sure exactly who that is for that region. Do you know, Pam?
Which region are they in?
Leadville and Lake County.
Yeah,
okay.
That's Evan. And
Great.
Jennifer just put that in the chat. Thank you, Jennifer.
Perfect. And then we also got a question. Can you preview what federal fair housing requirements may be in play at this early stage? We are familiar with ensuring fair housing compliance farther down the line at the point of leasing or sale.
So this is really, project specific as you're working with your development specialist, that you would have these conversations so that as you're moving forward and moving down the line, that you're preventing any complications. That's really the point of an upfront early fair housing. Some people have no idea at all. So that's why we try to cover that at an earlier stage. It doesn't mean that items have to be done that early, but it's discussion for information so that moving forward, again, you're more in alignment with your project and fair housing requirements. Does that make sense?
We got a thumbs up for that. And then we had one more question about if we could discuss DOH's process around BABA or schedule a separate webinar to discuss it.
Yes, Alex, I was just going to say that would actually be something separate that we would want to put in play. And it's great to put that in here because we have people looking at what other sessions, might we need. And so, great question. And thanks for that. And that will be looked at.
All right, looks like all the questions, that was all the questions in the chat.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. Now we'll move on to Neighborly. Some of you might be familiar with the Neighborly application software program we use. When you're ready to begin your application, your housing development specialist can set up a portal for your project. Just let them know the name of your project and the names and addresses of those who will need access to the portal, and we can set that up for you. This slide here, there's a lot of information. It shows the 8 tabs to be completed during the pre-application period. So once you're in Neighborly, you'll see that almost all of these tabs prompt you to upload supporting documentation. For now, I just want to reiterate what Shirley said, that it's not necessary to upload these documents until after the pre-application documents are submitted. These tabs collect information about your project, about your development team, site information, community and local support. And this is the most time-intensive section of the application. An example blank Neighborly application can be found on the DOH webpage, and Malia will add this link to the chat. The final 5 tabs listed here are mostly signature pages with just one detailed tab that requires information for our contracting team. We recommend beginning the application process well in advance of deadlines to allow time for feedback from your development specialist. This is especially important when the development specialist has multiple applications to review. We want to make sure that we are meeting your needs before your application goes in. Now we'll talk about the budget spreadsheet. The budget spreadsheet is a tool that tracks all financial aspects of the project. This includes all costs, both development and annual expenses, income from home sales or rentals, sources of financing, including loans, grants, and equity, and a pro forma that projects future financial performance. Spreadsheets can be found on the DOH application webpage, and I think we provided that link earlier. There are 3 options to choose from: rental, for sale, and mobile home communities. Please always download a new spreadsheet from the website link to be sure you have the most recent version that reflects current rent and income limits that change every year. To provide a quick overview of the spreadsheet, I'll share the main tabs for a typical multifamily rental project. This spreadsheet can also be used for permanent supportive housing projects. So this is the table of contents, and in this presentation, we'll focus on the first 4 tabs that are highlighted in yellow. Starting with the development budget tab, this captures all project costs. For the best results, be sure to enter costs on the appropriate line. This will be important when staff compares these costs with the estimates provided by your contractor, and this information will also feed to other areas of the spreadsheet. The income and expenses tab calculates rental income and other income, such as parking, laundry, and late fees. An allowance for unit vacancies, usually 7%, is deducted to account for any unfilled units and/or unpaid rents. These calculations will determine what's called the effective gross income, which is all income minus the vacancy allowance. We covered income and vacancy on the previous slide. The income and expense tab also calculates annual expenses for items such as staff salaries, utilities, insurance, and maintenance costs. The PUPA, or annual per unit costs, is one tool to reveal the financial strength of a project. On the financing tab, you'll enter all sources of funds, including bank loans, grants, tax credits, owner equity, and the amount of your DOH funding request. Any difference between the sources and uses of the funding will either show a gap or a surplus in your project budget. The total amount at the bottom of this tab should equal the total amount of project's costs. Therefore, no gap and no surplus. The operating pro forma tab details the viability of a project over a period of 40 years. There's very little information to add to this tab, as most of the cells are carried forward from previous tabs, and the calculations as well. We have a recorded webinar that goes into more depth on the budget spreadsheets. The webinar is hosted by Ashley Hertzler, and we'll put a link in the chat for you. Any questions at this point? I think I saw some in the chat.
I saw one from Catherine, and I did respond in the chat. She was asking, but for everybody else, if the CHAFA spreadsheet is allowed. And it is an allowed spreadsheet, and that is also, it's in our documentation that that's allowed to be uploaded instead of using ours, because they've, obviously with the LIHTC project, they've already been working on CHAFA first, typically. So, great question, thank you.
Now, we did get one other question. Did you see, Shirley, from Lisa?
I did not.
Outside of the 2 pre-application rounds, application follow guidelines from DEVO. And when 75% of funding is committed, how are these applications viewed if there is not enough funding and the round is competitive?
So that 75% is a mark that needs to be met to be able to move forward. So that you would continue to work with your housing development specialist. But without that level of funding of commitment, it's difficult to be competitive when, projects are coming in with even higher than the 75% met. So it's very difficult to be competitive and we're not moving them forward when there isn't at least that 75% met.
And again, that information helps us to see what your project gap is, which is where DOH funding comes in.
Yeah.
Okay, turning it over to Shirley for the application checklist.
So the application checklist can be downloaded, and it's going to be placed in the chat now. And it's one document with 3 checklists within it now, so that you can click on your project type and then see what all the documents are that relate to that project type. Again, your housing development specialist will go over that with you too. And the checklist mirrors neighborly sections. So when you go to upload your supporting documents to neighborly, that checklist has already given you an idea of what it is that you're going to need. An example is that section B checklist. The items on that list are going to mirror section B uploads in neighborly. So as you can see, we recommend some of the documents be requested and acquired earlier than others based on the potential timeline it may take to receive the acceptable version and have your development specialist review it. The 90-day documents are a property condition assessment or a PCA, or a capital needs assessment or a CNA. And a mobile home park acquisition or an infrastructure project would require the PCA, and a rehab project would require a CNA. And I'll go into those a little bit further in a moment. A phase 1 environmental study, we also recommend requesting in advance a market study or a housing needs assessment as well. Then 60 days in advance, you want to request an appraisal, a full set of architectural schematics, and a third-party cost estimate. And those cost estimates have to support your development budget in the spreadsheet. You'll start requesting letters of intent from funders because the date of the letter of intent needs to be within 30 days of the full application submission. So you're asking in advance so you can look over documents, you can talk with the funders and negotiate if they'll negotiate. But you want to ensure that the date on the letter of intent is no more than 30 days from the date of the full application submission. So if the funder will put an expiration date on their terms, that is also really helpful. Not required, but it's helpful. Same for waivers. You're going to need a signed letter on the letterhead confirming the entity providing the waiver and the dollar value of the waiver. A letter of consistency. This goes with a consolidated plan, but it's only required if you're receiving federal funding and the project is in an entitlement community. And then, of course, the spreadsheet, which was just reviewed. So this is most likely going to be updated as sources and cost estimates are provided, sources are confirmed. And you're going to want to make sure that you get this to your development specialist for review before the application due date. Without an upfront review, your housing development specialist cannot advise you on issues within the spreadsheet or funding or anything else that might be in the spreadsheet, and discuss your request in detail too. Once the project is in the underwriting phase, we do not have an opportunity to catch issues at that point. So we really try to help applicants up front. So as noted, all the other documents really can be created and completed within the final 30 days prior to submission. Documents like a signatory authority form that needs a board resolution or bylaws to support it, and that confirms that the person named in the signatory authority form has been approved to sign all documents. So these documents, these kind of other sections, they all do still get reviewed to ensure that they're correct. And we're looking for really the smallest details, that legal names are used throughout neighborly and in the document. Sometimes it really is a period or a comma that is needed. So if you can complete your application 2 weeks in advance of the deadline, then your housing development specialist, who again may have multiple applications to work on, they can continue to see revisions that might be needed in neighborly or documents that aren't quite where they need to be. Our goal in helping you with all of this is to get you to the finish line. So you hit that submit button and it's a complete application and it's in spectacular form. That is our goal. So a couple of items with a little bit more specific information. The capital needs assessment or a property condition assessment are one of the items that we again recommend that you get up front. So for rehab or preservation acquisition, it is a CNA. And then for a mobile home park, it's a PCA. Either type of assessment must have been completed within 12 months of the date of application submission, and the report needs to cover 15 years into the future. The mobile home park PCA must include physically assessing underground utility infrastructure, and then the CNA or PCA must also provide a detailed inspection of the property's condition and of all systems. So we require the report to follow the ASTM 2018 standard guide, and it has to be conducted by a trained individual. Do you have any questions about a PCA or CNA? Okay. Next, the phase 1 environmental study. This report must be no older than 12 months also from the date of application. The report will identify any environmental hazards on the property. So if a phase 1 identifies recognizable environmental conditions or RECs, then an additional report addressing the RECs will be needed and should be submitted with the application. So this is why we recommend that you order your phase 1 early, because if a phase 2 is needed, we want that phase 2 with the application submission. The report narrative should include a mitigation approach, and that would apply if there are wrecks on the land. Market studies or housing needs assessment. They also must be dated within 12 months of application submission. The report has to identify if there is a need for the number, size, and type of housing proposed in the project. So for example, if the project you're proposing has 50 units in it and you're going to serve AMIs or area median incomes at 100% or lower, then we need to see in that housing market study or the housing needs assessment that more than 50 units serving different AMI levels are needed in the community. If your proposed income levels are specific 60 to 100% AMI, and you want your project to be competitive, then the market study needs to demonstrate a need for more than 50 units with the income levels in your project. So for all projects,
Okay, talk to you later. I'm here.
I think someone they're on mute. Okay, so for all projects except occupied rehab, we want that third-party market study. A housing needs assessment can be submitted for projects with fewer than 10 units, and then for occupied rehab projects, we need the waitlist data. The appraisal. We recommend that the appraisal by a professional be ordered at least 60 days out from application due date for any project that includes acquisition in the development budget. The evaluation can be no older than 6 months from your date of application. And for existing properties and adaptive reuse properties, we need an as-is valuation based on current rents or prior to the conversion. The land value contribution must be determined and reported separately in the same appraisal report. For home ownership projects, we want both as-is and as-built or as-complete conditions. And that includes what the value of the project will be when the units are completed and there's a covenant on the properties. Are there any questions about checklists or checklist documents right now? Okay, let's move on to the final step. This is really just the final steps before hitting like submit, because obviously it takes a little bit longer than doing all of this to actually get answers. But I'm calling it the final step. So the full application requires you to complete all of Neighborly sections up to and including the submit button. If you are completing the application in time for your housing development specialist to review and comment, then wait to hit submit, because we'll be checking everything. The entire 45 days from pre-application to the actual due date, we're looking at everything as often as possible, sending written updated notes, potentially requesting meetings to discuss something in person. And really, again, we're trying to get you to that place where everything in our requirements are being met. Our goal is to help you get that highest score and an excellent review of the project, so the project is recommended for funding. It's important to remember that most of our funding cycles have more applications and money requested than is available. So the road to a complete application prior to the deadline is to provide your housing development specialist with enough time to review the application in entirety before you hit that submit button. And you've been learning about this roadmap to success now for about 45 minutes. And really what your housing development specialist is doing, and it seems like a lot at times maybe, but the tasks and the updates are all kind of side roads to make sure that you receive word that your project is moving forward with a recommended funding award. And then you know you've reached your final destination when that award letter is sent to you in an email. So any questions about this process from concept to hitting submit. Okay, let's move into, we have just a few more sections. Scoring criteria, there's often many questions about it, so I want to cover it just a little bit briefly. The scoring criteria is applied to our applications now, making all applications part of a competitive process. The scoring criteria documents are going to be uploaded into the chat. There's 5 categories for scoring and then 7 bonus point categories. 2 categories are worth 20 points, management capacity and leveraged funds. Management capacity is where we are looking at an applicant's experience with affordable housing and development and your connection to the region. Then we're also looking at compliance, and if as an applicant you've been awarded funds in the past, or if you have a current active contract, we're looking for signs of positive performance. For leveraged funds, we're looking at the percentage of our funding within the total project costs. The suggested funding ranges vary based on the type of project, but they run between 10 and 15%. And there's more details in the scoring criteria document on the application webpage. The 3 categories where you can receive up to 10 points are cost reasonableness, energy efficiency certification pursued, and accessibility units. Cost reasonableness looks at total cost per unit based on our ranges. Your housing development specialist can go over them with you once they have a spreadsheet. The ranges are on the assessment tab in the spreadsheet, and they're also in the application instructions. For energy efficiency, pursuing one of the listed energy efficiency certifications can award medium or high points based on the published list and the scoring criteria. We've also initiated points for providing accessible units, both for mobility and sensory impairments under both state and federal funding. Providing the minimum 10% mobility units and 4% sensory units in the project can be awarded the mid-level points, and then exceeding percentages can result in the maximum points. So an example, if you have that 50-unit rental project and it has 5 units accessible for physical impairments and 2 sensory units, the application would receive 5 points for meeting the minimum standard. If the project proposal has 8 units and 4 units, then the higher points can be awarded. All federally funded projects are required to meet at least the minimum standard. But for state-funded projects, this is a scoring benchmark. Building no accessible units in a state-funded project will result in 0 points. The last 7 sections of the scoring criteria are bonus point categories where innovation is awarded up to 2 points in each category. And you'll find these in section D in neighborly. And then each item has a section where you can put in a narrative and demonstrate how you'll be meeting, this innovative section to receive 2 extra points. So if an area such as early childhood education is not being offered on the property, then just put NA. Don't leave it blank, but you don't need to explain anything further. You can just say NA. Not all of these bonuses are going to apply to every project, and then each narrative is really going to be evaluated for its specific connection to the scoring criteria. Any scoring criteria questions before we go over the application timeline very quickly? Okay, let's move into the timeline. So this is a brief model of the timeline as it appears in our application instructions with a little color added by me. So while the length of time for submitting a pre-application can be a year or longer, once the pre-application is submitted, you work for 45 days on finalizing a full application with your housing development specialist, and then click on submit, and then an application timeline for review and decisions starts. So we have a 10-day review period where underwriting is establishing if the application is missing any information. If yes, the details or documents needed will be requested by the underwriter for the project, and then you have 7 days to submit that information to be able to meet threshold. If threshold is not met, then underwriting goes into, if threshold is met, sorry, we're staying positive. Threshold is going to be met. Then underwriting goes into the deeper review to assess the project's feasibility. At the end of the 45 days, an applicant will be notified by the housing development specialist that they've been recommended for funding with the amount and the date of the state housing board meeting where presentations will happen. After State Housing Board and the execution of an award letter, contract drafting begins. With our new legislation, contracting now has 90 days to finalize documents once they begin contract drafting. This is, however, dependent on the awardee, their comments and how long they take to get back to contracting. So a larger chart is on page 23 and 24 around in the application instructions around all of these timelines. And it is just a model, just so you know, because it does say that in the application instructions as well. So now back to Pam to close out the presentation.
Okay, so we hope this presentation has been helpful to you. If you have questions or comments at this time, you can use the chat or raise your hand and unmute yourself. And while we're taking comments and questions, we're going to bring up one slide. There we go, with the contact information of programs that we have mentioned today. And then the next slide will be the map of the development specialist regions, which you've already seen. And you're always welcome to contact your development specialist after the presentation with any specific or general questions you have. Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to questions.
Okay.
Okay, we might have answered them all.
I guess so. No questions. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. We hope that this was informative and helpful.
Yes, thank you guys. Yeah, thanks Pam and Shirley. That was a great presentation. And yeah, just reiterating, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're always wanting to help in any way. And just want to also mention that this presentation will be posted, the recording will be posted on our website. I'm going to put the link to that in the chat. And we will also have the slides on there as well. But we hope to see everyone at our September webinar. That's going to be on September 10th. And we hope everyone has a great rest of their day.